The stranger arrived at the ranch just before sunset, carrying nothing but a torn canvas bag and a past he refused to speak about. Before the night was over, a lonely widow would offer him something no man in Willow Creek had ever expected, and the choice he made would change 3 lives forever. The summer of 1883 had nearly burned the life out of the small town of Willow Creek, Nebraska. The grass had turned yellow beneath the endless sun, the creek had fallen low, and dust moved across the road like pale smoke. 5 miles beyond town stood a worn ranch house with a leaning porch and a roof that leaked whenever rain finally came. Rachel Dawson stood beside the front steps, holding a broken fence board in both hands. Her brown dress was faded from years of washing, and a loose strand of dark hair clung to her damp cheek. She was only 30 years old, but grief had placed tired lines around her eyes. Her husband, Thomas, had died 3 winters earlier after a logging accident near the river. Since then, Rachel had tried to run the ranch alone. She fed the chickens, repaired fences, carried water, planted corn, and cared for the few cattle that remained. Still, every month brought another bill she could not pay. The bank wanted the ranch. A wealthy cattle owner named Curtis Blackwell wanted the land. And nearly everyone in town believed Rachel would soon lose everything. A small boy sat beneath the shade of the porch, turning a smooth stone in his hand. His name was Noah, and he was 7 years old. He had his father's gray eyes, but none of his father's laughter. Since Thomas died, Noah had become quiet. He spoke only when he had to and stayed close to his mother whenever strangers came near. Rachel looked toward him and forced a smile. "Go inside, sweetheart," she said. "The heat is too strong." Noah did not move. His eyes were fixed on the road. Rachel followed his stare and saw a man walking through the dust. He was tall and broad across the shoulders. His brown coat was tied around his waist, and his shirt was dark with sweat. His boots were worn almost smooth. He carried a canvas bag over one shoulder, and his hat sat low over his face. Rachel placed the fence board against the porch and reached for the old rifle Thomas had left near the door. The stranger noticed. He stopped several yards from the house and slowly raised both hands. "I mean no trouble, ma'am," he called. His voice was low and calm. Rachel kept one hand on the rifle. "What do you want?" The man removed his hat. His hair was dark, touched with gray near the sides. A thin scar ran from his left temple toward his cheek. He looked tired, but his blue eyes were steady. "My name is Daniel Mercer," he said. "I heard in town that someone out this way might need a ranch hand." Rachel almost laughed, but there was no joy in it. "I need more than a ranch hand." Daniel glanced at the broken fence, the damaged barn roof, and the dry field behind the house. "It appears you need several. I cannot afford even one." He looked toward the old barn, where a loose door moved in the wind. "I can work for meals and a place to sleep until the ranch earns enough to pay me." Rachel studied him carefully. Men did not walk across Nebraska for honest work unless they were running from something. Some ran from debt, some ran from the law, others ran from memories they could not escape. "What happened to your horse?" she asked. "Sold it for food 2 weeks ago." "Where are you coming from?" "Colorado." "What did you do there?" Daniel paused. "Worked cattle, fixed wagons, built fences, whatever kept me alive." Rachel noticed that he did not answer the question completely. Noah rose from the porch and moved behind his mother. Daniel looked at the boy, but he did not smile or step closer. Instead, he lowered his eyes as if he understood the child's fear. Rachel felt Noah's hand close around the back of her dress. She thought of the empty food barrel in the kitchen. She thought of the bank notice hidden beneath her Bible. She thought of Curtis Blackwell, who had visited 3 days earlier and offered to buy the ranch for less than half its value. When Rachel refused, he had smiled and told her that winter would change her mind. Daniel waited in the road without speaking. Rachel's heart beat harder. A normal woman would have sent him away. A careful woman would have ridden into town and asked the sheriff about him. But Rachel had reached the end of careful choices. "I have one condition," she said. Daniel placed his hat against his chest. "Name it." Rachel looked down at Noah. The boy's face was pale and his small fingers still gripped her dress. Then she looked back at the stranger. "I do not only need someone to fix my fences," she said. "I need a father for my child." Daniel's face changed. For the first time, the calm left his eyes. Rachel stepped down from the porch. "My son needs a man who will teach him, protect him, and stay when life gets hard. I need someone who will care for this ranch as if it were his own. I am not asking you to marry me. I am asking you to prove whether you are the kind of man who could one day deserve that place." Daniel stared at her as if she had struck him. Noah moved closer to Rachel. The wind pushed dust between them. "You do not know me," Daniel said. "No," Rachel replied, "and you do not know us. I could be dangerous. If you were, I believe you would have come closer before telling me." Daniel looked toward the road behind him. It stretched west through the empty land, leading toward another town, another job, and another lonely night. Rachel saw something painful move across his face. "I have failed people before," he said quietly. "So have I. I do not know anything about raising a boy." "You can learn. What if he never wants me here? Then you still treat him with kindness." Daniel looked at Noah again. The boy watched him with fear, but also with curiosity. "What happened to his father?" Daniel asked. "He died saving another man from a falling tree." Daniel lowered his head. "I am sorry." Rachel's voice softened. "So am I." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Daniel set his canvas bag on the ground. "If I stay," he said, "I will work for every meal. I will not enter your house without permission. I will never raise a hand to the boy, and I will leave the moment you ask me to." Rachel held his gaze. "And if danger comes?" Daniel's expression became firm. "Then it will have to pass through me first." Noah's fingers loosened on Rachel's dress. Rachel slowly held out her hand. Daniel stepped forward and took it. His grip was rough but careful. "You can sleep in the room beside the barn," she said. "Supper is at 7. Daniel nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Dawson." "Rachel." He looked surprised. "Thank you, Rachel." That evening, Daniel repaired the broken chicken gate before touching his supper. The work should have taken an hour, but he finished it in half that time. Afterward, he washed at the pump and sat at the far end of the kitchen table. Noah sat beside his mother, staring at the stranger over a bowl of beans. Daniel ate slowly and spoke only when Rachel asked him a question. "Do you have family?" she asked. "Not anymore." "Were you married?" His hand stopped above the bowl. "No." Rachel saw the pain in his face and did not ask more. After supper, Noah dropped his spoon. Daniel reached down and picked it up, but instead of placing it back on the table, he carried it to the wash basin and cleaned it. Noah watched every movement. "You do not have to be afraid of me," Daniel said gently. Noah lowered his eyes. Daniel returned to his seat. "I was afraid of strangers when I was your age, too." That made Noah look up. "Why?" the boy asked. It was the first word he had spoken all evening. Daniel's eyes softened. "Because I thought every stranger came to take something away." Noah glanced toward his mother. "Did they?" "Some did," Daniel answered, "but a few came to give something back." Rachel felt a strange ache in her chest. Later, after Noah had gone to bed, she stood at the kitchen window and watched Daniel cross the yard toward the barn. The moonlight fell across his shoulders, and for one brief moment, he looked less like a drifter and more like a man returning home. But before Daniel reached the barn, a rider appeared at the edge of the property. The horse was black. The rider wore a long gray coat. Rachel recognized him at once. Curtis Blackwell. He stopped near Daniel and remained in the saddle. Rachel opened the kitchen door but stayed in the shadows. Blackwell looked Daniel over with open dislike. "So you are the new hired hand," he said. Daniel did not answer. Blackwell leaned forward. "You should know something before you settle in. This ranch will belong to me before winter." Daniel's face remained calm. Does Mrs. Dawson know that? She will. Blackwell smiled. And when she loses it, anyone standing beside her will lose with her. Daniel stepped closer to the horse. Then I suppose you had better pray she stands alone. Blackwell's smile disappeared. Rachel held her breath. The two men stared at each other beneath the cold moonlight. Then Blackwell turned his horse toward the road. Before riding away, he looked back at Daniel. I know your face, he said. I just have to remember where I saw it. Daniel stood completely still. Blackwell disappeared into the darkness. Rachel watched Daniel enter the barn, but the words stayed in her mind. I know your face. For the first time since offering him a place at the ranch, Rachel wondered who Daniel Mercer truly was and what kind of danger had followed him to her door. The next morning, Daniel was already repairing the barn roof before Rachel finished making coffee. He worked in silence, but his movements were sharper than before. Every few minutes, he looked toward the road as if he expected Curtis Blackwell to return with more than words. Rachel watched from the kitchen window. She wanted to ask Daniel what Blackwell had meant, but Noah entered the room carrying his boots, and the question stayed locked inside her. By noon, Daniel had replaced 3 broken roof boards and repaired the barn door. After that, he led Rachel's oldest mare from the stable and checked her legs. She needs new shoes, he said. The blacksmith charges more than I can pay. I can do it. Rachel folded her arms. You can fix roofs, fences, wagons, and horseshoes. Daniel gave a small smile. I have had many jobs. That is not the same as having many answers. His smile faded. No, it is not. Rachel knew he understood what she was truly asking, but he turned back to the mare. For the next 2 weeks, the ranch slowly changed. Daniel fixed the north fence, cleaned the well, and rebuilt a damaged feeding shed. He woke before sunrise and worked until the stars appeared. He never complained about the heat, the poor food, or the hard bed beside the barn. Noah began following him from a distance. At first, the boy stayed near the porch. Then he moved to the edge of the yard. Soon, he was standing beside the fence while Daniel worked. Daniel never called him closer. One afternoon, Daniel sat beneath a cottonwood tree, repairing a leather saddle strap. Noah stood nearby, holding a small piece of rope. What are you making? Daniel asked. Noah looked down. A knot. What kind? I do not know. Daniel set the leather aside. Show me. Noah walked over slowly. The knot was loose and twisted. Daniel took the rope but did not untie it. This is a strong beginning, he said. It just needs direction. He showed Noah how to move the rope around his fingers and pull it tight. When they finished, Noah stared at the clean knot with pride. My father knew knots, he said. Daniel's hands became still. I am sure he did. He used to say a weak knot could lose a horse. Your father was right. Noah looked at him. Did your father teach you? Daniel stared across the field. No, I learned because no one else was there to teach me. Noah sat beside him. For several quiet minutes, neither spoke. From the porch, Rachel watched them beneath the tree. It was the first time Noah had chosen to sit beside another man since his father died. That evening, Rachel found a folded bank notice beneath the kitchen door. She read it twice. The payment was due in 14 days. If she failed, the bank would begin taking the ranch. Rachel sat at the table, holding the paper with shaking hands. Daniel entered carrying a basket of fresh eggs. He saw her face and placed the basket down. What happened? Rachel handed him the notice. Daniel read it slowly. How much do you owe? More than the ranch can earn this season. Can you sell cattle? I have only 8 left. Selling them would feed us for a while, but then the ranch would have no future. Daniel placed the notice on the table. Blackwell knows about this. He knows everything that happens at the bank. His brother sits on its board. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wants your land for a reason. He wants the creek. The creek is nearly dry. Not beneath the ground. Thomas believed there was a deep spring under the north pasture. Blackwell laughed at him until Thomas died. Then he began trying to buy the ranch. Daniel looked toward the dark window. Did Thomas leave maps or notes? Rachel hesitated. He kept a journal, but I have not opened it since his death. Why? Because his last words are inside. Daniel looked back at her. You may need them now. Rachel went to the bedroom and returned with a small brown book tied with a leather cord. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The pages were filled with Thomas's careful writing. He had recorded rain, cattle numbers, planting dates, and repairs. Near the back, Rachel found several pages covered with drawings of the north pasture. Daniel moved his chair closer. Thomas had marked a line from the creek toward a group of large rocks near the hill. Beside it, he had written that water could be heard beneath the ground after heavy rain. Daniel studied the drawing. If there is a spring, it could save the ranch. Rachel shook her head. We do not have time to dig across half the field. We do not need half the field. Thomas marked the place. She looked at him. You believe him? Daniel closed the journal. I believe a man does not fill 6 pages with the same idea unless he sees something worth chasing. The following morning, Daniel began digging near the rocks. The soil was hard and the summer sun beat down without mercy. He worked with a pick and shovel while Rachel carried away loose dirt. Noah brought them water. By evening, the hole was deep enough to stand inside, but there was no sign of moisture. The second day brought the same result. On the third day, Rachel's hands blistered. Daniel's shirt was soaked with sweat, and Noah's face had lost its early excitement. We should stop, Rachel said. We are wasting time. Daniel drove the shovel into the earth again. Your husband believed water was here. My husband believed many things. He believed in this ranch. Rachel turned away. He also believed he would come home that day. Daniel climbed out of the hole. He stood beside her, breathing hard. I cannot promise we will find water, he said, but I can promise Blackwell wants us to quit. Rachel looked toward the distant road. 2 riders were watching from the ridge. One of them was Curtis Blackwell. That night, someone opened the cattle gate. Daniel woke to the sound of hooves and found the remaining cattle moving toward the open prairie. He ran barefoot from the barn, caught the lead cow, and turned the herd before they reached the road. Rachel came outside holding a lantern. The gate was tied, she said. Daniel examined the rope. It was cut. A shadow moved near the barn. Daniel ran after it. The stranger crossed the yard and jumped onto a waiting horse. Daniel reached him before he could ride away and pulled him from the saddle. The man struck Daniel across the face, but Daniel drove him to the ground and held him there. Rachel lifted the lantern. The man was young, perhaps 20. She recognized him as one of Blackwell's ranch workers. Who sent you? Daniel asked. The young man spat dust. No one. Daniel pulled him upright. You cut the gate. You could have destroyed this family. The worker looked toward Rachel, then away. Mr. Blackwell said the widow would sell once the cattle were gone. Rachel felt cold anger rise inside her. Daniel released the man. Go tell Blackwell this ranch is not for sale. The worker climbed onto his horse and fled. Rachel stared at Daniel. You should have taken him to the sheriff. He would deny everything. Then why let him go? So Blackwell knows we are ready. Rachel noticed blood running from Daniel's lip. She took him inside and cleaned the cut with a wet cloth. Daniel sat at the table while Noah watched from the doorway. You have done this before, Rachel said. What? Fought men in the dark. Daniel looked down. Yes. Was Blackwell one of them? Daniel said nothing. Rachel stepped back. I brought you into my home. I placed my child near you. I deserve the truth. Daniel rose slowly. Years ago, I worked for a cattle company in Colorado. Blackwell was one of the men who bought stolen herds and forced small ranchers from their land. Rachel's face went pale. "You knew him?" "I knew his name. I did not know he was here until last night." "What did you do for that company?" Daniel's voice became rough. "I collected debts, I frightened people, sometimes I hurt them." Noah stepped farther into the room. Rachel looked toward her son, then back at Daniel. "Did you kill anyone?" Daniel's silence answered before his words did. "One man died during a fight," he said. "I did not mean to kill him, but he died because of me." Rachel gripped the table. "Why did you leave?" "Because the man had a wife and a little boy. I saw them standing beside his grave, and I understood what I had become." Noah's eyes widened. Daniel looked at him, but the boy moved behind his mother. Pain crossed Daniel's face. "I have been running since then," he said. "I came here hoping honest work might make me useful again." Rachel fought back tears. "You should have told me. I was afraid you would send me away." "I may still." Daniel nodded. "If you ask me to leave, I will." Before Rachel could answer, a loud crack came from outside. Then came the smell of smoke. Daniel ran to the door. The feeding shed was on fire. Flames climbed the dry wood and reached toward the barn roof. The horses screamed inside. Rachel grabbed a bucket while Daniel rushed into the smoke. He opened the stable door and drove the horses into the yard. Burning wood fell behind him. Noah stood near the porch, frozen in fear. A second section of the roof collapsed, sending sparks across the dry grass. One spark landed near Noah. The grass caught fire. "Noah!" Rachel screamed. Daniel crossed the yard through smoke and flame. He reached the boy, lifted him into his arms, and carried him away just as fire swept across the place where Noah had been standing. Daniel set him beside Rachel. Noah clung to his mother, coughing. Daniel turned back toward the burning shed. Rachel grabbed his arm. "No, it is lost. The barn could catch. You will die." Daniel looked at her. "This is your home." Before she could stop him, he ran back into the smoke. Rachel held Noah tightly and watched Daniel fight the flames alone. By dawn, the feeding shed was gone, but the barn still stood. Daniel collapsed near the well, his hands burned and his face black with soot. Noah pulled free from Rachel and ran toward him. Daniel looked up, expecting the boy to stop at a distance. Instead, Noah dropped to his knees and wrapped both arms around Daniel's neck. "Do not leave us," he whispered. Daniel closed his eyes. Rachel stood several feet away, watching the man she now feared and the son who had already begun to love him. Then a rider approached through the morning haze. It was Sheriff Grant. He stopped beside the burned shed and looked at Daniel. "Daniel Mercer," he said, "you are under arrest for murder in Colorado." Noah held Daniel tighter. Daniel did not run. He slowly raised his burned hands and looked at Rachel. "I told you danger would have to pass through me first," he said. "I never said it would not come looking for me." Sheriff Grant stepped down from his horse and removed a pair of iron cuffs from his belt. The early morning light fell across the burned shed, the blackened grass, and Daniel's injured hands. Rachel stood beside Noah, unable to speak. Daniel looked at the boy, still holding him tightly. "It is all right," he said softly. "You need to go to your mother now." Noah shook his head. "No." Daniel placed one burned hand against the boy's back. "I have to answer for what I did." "You saved me," Noah whispered. Daniel looked toward Rachel. "So did your father. A good act does not erase a bad one." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Sheriff Grant moved closer. "The warrant says you killed a man named Henry Cole outside Red Hollow, Colorado, 8 years ago." Daniel nodded. "I was there." "Then stand up." Daniel rose slowly. The pain in his hands and side showed on his face, but he did not complain. Rachel stepped between him and the sheriff. "He just saved my son from a fire." Grant's expression softened, but his voice remained firm. "I can see that, Mrs. Dawson. I can also see the warrant." "Who sent it?" "Curtis Blackwell brought it to my office before sunrise." Daniel looked toward the road. He knew where to find it. Sheriff Grant placed the cuffs around Daniel's wrists, careful not to press them against the burns. Noah began to cry. Daniel bent as low as the chains allowed. "Listen to me," he said. "You stay beside your mother, you help her with the chickens and carry water from the pump." "You said you would not leave," Noah said. "I am not choosing to leave." "Then come back." Daniel's face tightened. "I will try." Sheriff Grant placed Daniel on the back of his horse and rode toward town. Rachel watched until they disappeared beyond the ridge. The ranch felt empty again. By afternoon, the story had spread through Willow Creek. Some people said Daniel was a killer. Others said Blackwell had finally proved that Rachel had brought danger into her home. Rachel ignored them all. She left Noah with Mrs. Palmer, an older woman who lived near the church, and went directly to the jail. Daniel sat behind iron bars with cloth wrapped around his burned hands. He stood when Rachel entered. "You should not be here," he said. "I came for the truth." "I already told you." "You told me part of it." Daniel looked toward the floor. Rachel stepped closer to the bars. "Did you murder Henry Cole?" "No." "Did you kill him?" "Yes." "Tell me everything." Daniel took a slow breath. Blackwell's men had been forcing ranchers to sell their cattle for almost nothing. Henry Cole refused. Blackwell sent me and 2 other men to frighten him. Rachel listened without moving. "Henry came outside with a shovel," Daniel continued. "One of the men pulled a gun. I tried to stop him. Henry thought I was attacking and struck me. I pushed him away. He fell against a wagon wheel and hit his head." Daniel closed his eyes. "He died before sunrise." "What happened to the man with the gun?" "Blackwell paid him to leave Colorado." "And you?" "I stayed long enough to tell Henry's wife the truth. Then Blackwell warned me that if I went to the law, he would say I murdered Henry during a robbery." Rachel gripped the bars. "Was there anyone else who saw what happened?" "Henry's ranch worker, Samuel Price, but he disappeared after the funeral." Rachel remembered the journal hidden inside her home. "What did Henry own?" Daniel looked at her. "A cattle ranch with a deep spring beneath the north field." Rachel's breath stopped. "Just like mine." Daniel nodded. "That is why Blackwell wanted his land." Rachel finally understood. Blackwell was not only trying to steal her ranch, he had done the same thing before. She returned home before dark and opened Thomas's journal again. Near the final pages, she found a name she had not noticed before. Samuel Price. Thomas had written that a man named Samuel had passed through the ranch 2 years earlier. He had warned Thomas never to sell land to Curtis Blackwell. Thomas had also written where Samuel planned to settle. Pine Hollow, nearly 20 miles north. Rachel rose before dawn, borrowed Mrs. Palmer's horse, and rode toward Pine Hollow. She found Samuel Price living in a small cabin beside a sawmill. He was older now, with white hair and a deep scar across his chin. At first, he denied knowing Daniel. Then Rachel placed Thomas's journal on his table. "My husband believed you," she said. "Now Daniel Mercer may hang because you stayed silent." Samuel looked at the floor. "Blackwell threatened my family. My son nearly died last night because Blackwell burned our shed." Samuel's face changed. Rachel leaned forward. "How many people must suffer before you speak?" For a long moment, only the sound of the sawmill filled the cabin. Then Samuel opened a wooden box and removed an old, folded letter. "I wrote this after Henry died," he said. "I was too afraid to send it." The letter described everything. It said Daniel had tried to stop the attack and that Henry's death had been an accident. It also named Curtis Blackwell as the man who ordered the crime. Rachel rode back to Willow Creek with Samuel beside her. They reached town just as Daniel was being taken from the jail toward a wagon that would carry him back to Colorado. "Stop," Rachel shouted. The whole street turned. Sheriff Grant raised a hand, and the wagon stopped. Samuel stepped forward. "My name is Samuel Price," he said. "I saw Henry Cole die." Blackwell stood near the bank with two of his men. His face turned pale. Samuel gave the letter to Sheriff Grant and told the town what had happened. He spoke of Henry, the stolen cattle, the threats, and the lie used to blame Daniel. Blackwell moved toward his horse. Sheriff Grant drew his pistol. "Stay where you are." Blackwell froze. One of his men dropped his weapon. The other ran, but several ranchers blocked the road. Sheriff Grant read the letter twice. Then he removed Daniel's cuffs. "You are free until the judge reviews this," he said. "Blackwell is the one going into that cell." The crowd stood in silence. Daniel rubbed his wrists and looked at Rachel. "You rode to Pine Hollow for me." "I rode for the truth." Noah pushed through the crowd and ran into Daniel's arms. This time, Daniel held him without fear. "Papa," Noah whispered. The word broke something open inside Daniel. He closed his eyes and pressed his face against the boy's hair. Rachel stood beside them, crying openly. The judge arrived 2 weeks later. Samuel's statement, the old letter and records from Colorado proved that Blackwell had ordered the attack on Henry Cole. Daniel was cleared of murder. Blackwell was charged with fraud, threats, arson, and the old crime that had followed Daniel for years. But the ranch was still in danger. The bank payment was due the next morning. Daniel and Rachel returned to the north pasture and continued digging beside Thomas's marked rocks. Noah worked with a small shovel while Rachel cleared dirt. They dug until sunset. Then Daniel struck something soft beneath the hard earth. He dropped to his knees and pulled away the soil with his hands. A thin stream of water rose through the ground. Rachel stared. The stream became stronger. Within minutes, clean water filled the bottom of the hole. Thomas had been right. The deep spring turned the dry north pasture green within weeks. Rachel sold water rights to nearby ranchers and paid the bank before it could take her home. The ranch survived. Months later, Daniel stood on the repaired porch beneath a bright autumn sky. The barn roof was whole. The fences were straight. Noah was riding the old mare near the creek, laughing as Daniel had taught him. Rachel joined Daniel at the porch rail. "You came here asking for work," she said. Daniel smiled. "And you gave me the strangest answer a man ever heard." "I was desperate." "So was I." He reached into his coat and removed a simple silver ring. "I do not want this place because I need a roof," he said. "I do not want Noah because I am trying to forgive myself, and I do not want you because I am afraid of being alone." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I want all of it because I love you." Daniel lowered himself to one knee. "Rachel Dawson, will you let me stay as your husband and as Noah's father for the rest of my life?" Noah rode toward the porch and jumped from the mare. "Say yes, Mama." Rachel laughed through her tears. "Yes." Daniel stood, and she wrapped her arms around him. They were married in the small Willow Creek church on a cool Sunday morning. Noah carried the rings in a wooden box Daniel had carved by hand. When the preacher asked Daniel if he would care for Rachel in good years and hard ones, Daniel looked at her with calm, honest eyes. "I already chose her in the hardest year," he said. "I will choose her in every year after." The people of Willow Creek never forgot the stranger who arrived on foot asking for a job. They remembered the widow who asked him for something greater. They remembered the boy who gave him the name he thought he would never deserve. And they remembered that a man's past can follow him across every mile, but it does not always decide where his road must end. Sometimes one honest chance is enough to turn a drifter into a father, a dying ranch into a home, and 3 lonely people into a family.